but the issue of actually coming out and endorsing candidates as a affiliate can only be done if you're a C4. But on the issues, please go to the school boards and speak about how our branch, how our affiliate feels about the issue you're considering that night. And we encourage you to do that. Speak on behalf of AAUW California. We've actually created a speech that you can use, which is on the slides, but I'm not, that will be too much information. But please look at our toolbox that we have under Public Policy School Board study. We encourage you, again, if you are a C3, we encourage you, I'm sorry, a C4, we encourage you to go out and seek candidates. You can do it, okay? So I just wanted to get that out. We also have a request that if something is happening in your school district, and we expect more and more occurring during the summer, obviously before the election in 2024, please notify us. Please let us know. And I am your representative, if you will. Here's a speech here, but I don't have it here. I am listed. I will give you my email address though but it is also listed. I'm handling all of the southern region, including LA, Riverside, obviously, and please send word to us that this is occurring. We want you to know, can you help? That type of thing. So I didn't want to go over, so I'm, I know you may have some questions.
I think you answered all the questions, Sina, because we don't have any questions listed, but we want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. And we pledge that we will certainly stay in contact with you on these local issues and the local school board issues. And we thank you. We thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And now we're going to move to someone who will have something to say that will fit into and piggyback on Sina. Alana Bird is here. She is the National Field Director for People for the American Way. Sina, I don't know, is it possible for you to take your...
Yes, I'm going to try to...
Thank you.
Yeah,
Alana is the National Field Director for the People for the American Way. And one of their groups is precisely the Grandparents for Truth, Grandparents for Liberty, that Sina was referring to. Alana worked in numerous nonprofits. When I looked at her LinkedIn, it was just amazing how many groups she's worked with. She was campaign manager for Ithacans for Reimagining Public Safety, a legislative assistant several times to Congressman Brendan F. Boyle, and she's a summa cum laude graduate of Temple University. So please welcome Alana Bird. We're so honored to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. And I am going to try to share my screen here. Let's see if that works. Let's see, share screen. I found it. I'm always so bad at this. Okay, I think that's the right one. Let's see. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thanks for having me so much. And yeah, this presentation dovetails nicely with what Sina was just talking about, since we are Grandparents for Truth, and we were active in Temecula, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and just another way for folks to get involved. So, yep, I'm going to talk about Grandparents for Truth. It's a pretty new project, and it's a project of People for the American Way, which I'll also talk about. And though I am not a grandparent, grandparents were the impetus behind this program, and I was asked to take the lead on recruiting and welcoming in grandparents to this program. So
Member.
yeah. So what is Grandparents for Truth? So it's a group for grandparents and their allies, which I'll also explain. And it was organized by People for the American Way, which I mentioned. And I'll explain that in a second too. It's the main goal is to fight for the next generation's freedom to learn and to read. And we resist authoritarian attacks. So those are the kind of the two main goals. Okay, so People for the American Way, you may or may not be familiar with it. It's a group that was founded in 1980 by two individuals, Barbara Jordan, who's a congresswoman, one of the first Black congresswomen in U.S. Congress, and Norman Lear, who you may also be familiar with. He was a TV producer, most famous for some shows like All in the Family, The Jeffersons. So kind of these very edgy TV shows that showed racism really in stark contrast to some of the shows that were on at the time. And actually, he just made news a few weeks ago now on his passing at 101 years old. He was very active up until the end of his life in People For, and was one of the founding members of Grandparents for Truth. He said, "This is something that's really important to me. Make it happen." And so we made it happen. So that's kind of the impetus for starting it. So who can join Grandparents for Truth? The short answer is anyone. We don't we prefer that bigots and, people who are on the other side of the censorship effort don't join. However, anyone who believes in the next generation's freedom to read and learn is welcome to join. But the long answer to that is we've got grandkids are able to join, grandparents able to join, grandparents adjacent, and allies. So what's a grandparent adjacent? A great example is actually my own mother. She is in this weird zone right now. So her son, my brother, has a partner who has a son. So she kind of has like an unofficial step grandson. She also has, I actually am gonna have a baby in June or in July. So she will be a grandparent for the first time for real in July. But until then, she's kind of a grandparent adjacent. I promised her, she asked if she could be part of Grandparents for Truth. I said, of course. She said, well, then you have to give me a grandchild. So that was the deal we made. So happily obliging. And then an ally. What's an ally? An ally is, really it can be anyone. But when I think of that, I think of a person who may be in their grandparent age, who doesn't have children or doesn't have grandchildren, but still wants to be involved. So we don't say, oh, you don't have grandchildren, you can't be part of this. We say, if you want to be a grandparent for truth, you can be. So why was it founded? I think we all know here why this was necessary, but I'll go over it anyway. So we've seen a rise of authoritarian groups in the past. As Adrienne or Sina mentioned, this is kind of like a cycle that we see. Every decade, we see it kind of rise up again and bubble up. And in fact, People for the American Way was involved in fighting back against censorship and book banning back in the 90s. I wasn't there, but they created a guide to fighting back against it that actually formed the basis of a guide that we're about to publish now about how to fight back against that. So against book banning and censorship. So but we've seen it again, right? We're seeing the rise of authoritarian groups. They're just a different wolf in different sheep's clothing, but it's the same idea. And we've also seen a rise in book banning. We've seen more and more. 2023 was like had the most challenges and book bans that we've ever seen. And we also noticed that when we started working in this field, this time around, what we saw was that there's actually a lot of groups out there. And Sina mentioned some of them. We work really closely with Defense of Democracy. They're a great group, and we work with Indivisible. We work with Red, Wine, and Blue. We work with AAUW, a lot of groups. And what we saw was that there was no specific programming for grandparents. And I think I talk about this later on in the presentation, but I'll just mention now. Well, I'll talk about it later just in case. I don't want to, get ahead of myself, but we see that grandparents are taking a really active role in fighting back against censorship and book banning. And so, and a lot of grandparents are content to work with people of all ages. But what we're seeing is a lot of grandparents saying, finally, this is a place where I can kind of have peer-to-peer relationships and work with people that, I'm comfortable with. So, yep, this is what I was going to go with next. So why grandparents? Well, one of the things that we've noticed is, I think we all know this, grandparents are kind of our mentors. We have our parents who might be strict or might, want to see us succeed, and grandparents just want their grandkids to like have the world. They're our mentors and our guides. They have a stake in the future. They've seen a lot of the past, and they want to make sure that that's in some ways not repeated in the future. So my own mother, who I've mentioned before, she's my greatest inspiration. She is a child of Holocaust survivors. And so she instilled in me very early on that, this is something that's very important to remember our history so that it's not repeated. And so when she, she's also an educator. She was an English teacher for a very long time. She's now a school administrator, and she sees this all the time. And, she says to me, Alana, this is how it starts. Like, this is what we saw back in the 30s in Germany. First they banned the books, and then they started telling people that, we don't want folks poisoning our blood, like we're the rhetoric we're hearing now. So, they have a stake in the future. They've seen the past. So that's also their unique perspective on history. And they're part of our diverse landscape. I think in the progressive space, we see a lot of emphasis on diversity, which is great. And we're seeing it more and more. We're making sure that we're including people of all abilities, all colors, creeds, races, religions. And we need to make sure that we're also including people of different ages, both from all the way, all the oldest folks like Norman Lear was to the youngest folks too. I was recently in a space where there was a very young activist who actually felt like, maybe middle school or high school, who felt like he was being left out because people didn't believe that he had enough experience to say what he wanted to say. So we're making sure that, when we say diverse, we mean diverse in all ways. And then, as I mentioned, Norman Lear, who saw what was happening and said, oh no, we're not going to let this happen. And I want to mention one more thing for grandparents. Also, what we're seeing now is that more and more grandparents are also becoming sole guardians of their grandchildren.